That music was brought to you and played by Steve Miller, my brother-in-law, and produced by Lainey Miller, my niece.
Welcome to another episode of the Outside Insights podcast, where we engage with individuals who are making a difference. I'm your host, Chris Burkhard, and today I'm thrilled to have Chris Bystriansky here. Chris, in addition to being a husband, father, attorney, and real estate investor, is also author of 2 books, which I can't wait to dig into, coach, speaker, and Ironman triathlete. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it, Chris. And hopefully I'll be able to share some great insights with the audience. And just a disclaimer, if I say something incredibly insightful or helpful to you, thank Chris for bringing me on to the show. If I say something incredibly ridiculous, blame me. It's all right here.
That seems like well, we're both named Chris, so you can just blame Chris and get away with it if you think about it. But, you know, Chris, my goal has been to help our listeners close their personal and professional gaps through the stories and lessons of my guests. And I just wanted to share, I'm going to kind of like maybe be a geek with you for a second, because I immediately identified with your story in your book, Renting from My 6-Year-Old. You grew up an athlete, I grew up an athlete. I liked hearing about your focus on being a student, and it seemed like you had a lot of support and a lot of belief in the power of that education and how to parlay that into like a good job and the right career. And how many of us thought that that was like how you got ahead and how you'd find happiness and success. So I just wanted to share that, how much that meant. But first question, kind of talk about how your career and what brought you to some of the conclusions on many of the things that are so prominent in your book. And just give you a chance to introduce yourself a bit, and I'll ask some good questions to get us going here.
So I was born and raised in Chicago, single parent, single mom. She worked really hard, and I had a pretty low end childhood. I mean, I was loved, but we didn't have any money. And the way I learned to get out of that situation, and I want to be clear, I wanted the hell out of that situation, was to go and get a great education and get that corporate job, buy that house, and just live a long, happy life. And I did that to the best of my ability because I knew there was something better out there than what I was experiencing as a kid. I remember on weekends, my mom would go to work and me and my brother would be left at home. I was 6, 7 years old at the time. Wow. And it just every Saturday, that's what happens. And it was just me and my brother. We fought, we made up, but I knew I wanted a better life. And I thought that education was the way out of that. So graduating from high school, I went off to school. When I got done with college, I went on to law school because in my mind, again, more education meant happier life, more money, more impact on the world. I mean, it was pretty clear connection to me, or so I thought. I got out of law school.
Wouldn't you agree that was kind of maybe a familial norm, but it was a cultural thing, right? I mean, it was a broader, I don't know who told us that, but it seemed that's what we were led to believe.
Right. I was instilled at a very young age that you're going to college and that's it. Because I think there was a fear that if I didn't go to college, I would be getting into a lot of trouble, which may or may not be the case. But I think college was an easy way to stay relatively safe and learn something and be occupied all at the same time.
That's fair.
Yeah. So I don't, my beliefs have changed over time, but at that point in my life, back in the 90s, this is what was pretty common. I mean, you mentioned that is what we were instilled in. And I think that plan worked back then.
And I cut you off. You were going to law school, so pick back up.
Yeah. So I went to law school, got out. I worked for 8 years as an attorney, and I wanted to do something different. I wanted more excitement. I felt like I was just stuck at my desk or stuck doing research. I was working in the corporate world in tax. And although I consider myself a tax nerd now, because I think it's really business, it helps business grow. But at the time, I had enough and I wanted to go do something different with my career. And I was in my corporate role, I was being pushed to go get an advanced degree in tax law. Okay, so that's 2 more years of specific tax education in the law. And it was something I was not willing to do because I didn't want to double down on a career that I was not fully committed to. So
we already had 2 degrees at that point, right?
Yeah, I had my undergrad degree and the law degree, but I tried to get out and go find different jobs. But everybody saw my resume that I was an attorney, and they only were looking at me as an attorney. So I had to do something completely different. And again, my focus was, or my thought process was, more education meant better paying job, happier quality of life. So I went and got an MBA, and I was finished with the MBA. And then I worked 8 more years in the corporate world in the commodity business at a big energy company in Texas. And at that point, after 8 years, I had enough, and I had already started a side gig of investing in real estate, and I walked away. I walked away from my corporate job.
So you're either the nightmare or the hero of so many as you tell this story, right? I mean, I hear the common theme is freedom and independence, right? Yet there's still this vestige that, you get the education, you start in an entry-level job, you work your way up, you stick with a good company. I think you even referenced that. And I think, those that listen to me, I talk about the shifting workforce and workplace realities, that there just really is not a parental organization that's going to guide your career. So I admired that you learned about yourself, but also decided what you wanted to do and how you wanted to take control of things. How much of, because your first book, Renting from My 6-Year-Old, which is the best title in the world, a lot of it, it's almost 2 books to me, and I think you know that, but the story of what you wanted to share about your journey is one part of that, how you viewed taking control of your career. And then the second part, of course, is what everybody probably will want to talk about. But focus on that first part if there's more that you haven't shared there.
Yeah. When I was thinking about education growing up, I wanted 2 things. I wanted money, and I wanted 3 things. I wanted money, security, and I wanted to make an impact on the world. So I pursued all that education thinking that that was the only way to achieve that. Well, after living in the corporate world for so long, I realized that those things were not guarantees in the corporate world. All right. I was laid off after 1 year. Major corporation had layoffs after my first year of law school. So that whole security argument of working in the corporate world is blown out of the water very early in my career. Okay. But I continued to stay in the corporate career because the money was so good. I was basically locked up. And I didn't have the courage to go do something different. But eventually,
the golden handcuffs, as they're called.
Yeah. From my first job in the corporate world to my last job, I quadrupled my salary. All right. But still, I had to walk away from it because it was not fulfilling me and giving me the time that I needed with my family. My wife and I started to have kids, and I wanted to be able to grow something that I could pass on to them and teach them. I mean, you think about it like this. Let's say you go to work in a corporate job, and it pays you, and that's fine and everything, and you rise all the way up to be CEO. But once you're CEO, that's no guarantee that you can pass anything along to your children, right? When you're done being CEO, your kids cannot take over that position of being CEO unless it's your company. But for the most part, they've got to start from scratch. And I didn't want my kids to go through the same time, energy, and money suck that I went through for so long and get halfway through their life and realize this is not the path that they wanted to be at.
Well,
so
you put all that time and energy into it, and you realize it's not a place you want to be.
It's not the only answer. It is an answer for a lot of people, which is fine, but it's not the only answer. So I wanted to give my kids a leg up, teach them immediately what I learned throughout my life and finally took action on in my 40s. So I had the mentality that I was going to get a job and I got paid for my job. So I was essentially trading my time for money. It was a lot of money, I'll grant that, but still I only had a few weeks of vacation a year. I was missing stuff at home. I didn't have the freedom that I want. I wasn't living the life that I want, and I wanted to do something different. So I looked outside of my box. I looked outside of the corporate world, and I started meeting people who had a different lifestyle than I did, people outside of the corporate world. That's hard to do because you're so entrenched with the people around you that it's hard to break out from that. But
Chris, I always say the hardest thing in the world is new thinking.
it's inertia, right? Inertia
Yes.
is what kills dreams and stops people from really elevating to the levels that they should be at.
That and the
Inertia.
Sunday night blues. That's the other one. When
Yeah.
that rolls around and you're back at it again.
Yeah, I'm happy to say now I have no idea what day it is. My life is governed by the school calendar, not by a corporate calendar anymore. If it weren't for school, I'd have no idea what month it was, no idea what day it was, but I have to now because I have to remember to go get my kids from school. All right. So
And I think to be
that's
clear,
absolutely.
you've got an active career, an active thing. It's just you're now in control of your time, and that's pretty spectacular. Yep. So keep going with this, but I want to kind of, obviously we've laid out the title of the book, Running from My 6-Year-Old. What was the inspiration to write the book? And then we can talk about it.
So I wanted to teach my daughter, who happened to be 6 at the time, the things that I needed to learn a long time ago, but I failed to because I was so entrenched in the corporate world. So I took my undergrad degree is psychology. All right. I love relationships and understanding how people learn and how they can learn more quickly. So I took that experience, my corporate background, and my real estate investing experience, and I crammed them all together, and I developed this process to run my daughter through in a short time frame so that she could get rid of the employee mindset and really start thinking like an investor. It's totally fine to be an employee, but if you have the resources to be an investor as well, I think you should take it. So I wanted to give my daughter the courage and the understanding to move forward. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to teach anybody something that they are not willing to learn or they may be above their head, but it's damn near impossible. All right. It's damn near impossible to teach a 6-year-old almost anything. All right. Because they're all over the place. So I could not simply sit her down and say, hey, honey, we're going to be doing some investing or spending our money to buy things that pay us. None of that would have worked. It would take me 50 years.
Words that don't matter, right? It's too much gap.
Right. And I've had that same conversation hundreds of times with peers or people in the corporate world who could not make the jump from being an employee to being an investor. So I knew it was going to be hard for her as a 6-year-old to grasp that concept. Okay.
Probably just as hard as an adult as a 6-year-old. Now that I think about it,
it's the exact same process. It's the exact same fear, hesitation, doubt, anger. They go through this curve of disbelief, anger, fear before they're able to move forward. Some people can move forward and some people cannot. So here's what happened with my 6-year-old. All right. I first wanted her to act like an employee.
How quickly she did.
I gave her one job a week. So over the course of 3 weeks. So in week 1, she had 1 job. In week 2, she had 2 jobs. In week 3, she had 3 jobs. And I paid her $1 per job. So at the end of the first week, she had $1. At the end of the second week, she had 1 plus the 2, so 3. And at the end of the third week, she had $6. All right.
What kind of job did you have her do?
Oh, just absolutely basic. Now, you think about this. I'm trying to parallel a career. I gave her nonsense jobs. All right. So the first job was to open the blinds in the back of the house and the front of the house in the morning and close them at night. The second job was to straighten out 3 carpets in the house, 3 rugs in the house. Okay. And the third job was to turn the lights on outside at night in the front in the backyard. Just flip the switch. That's all she had to do. Okay, kind of meaningless, something that anybody can do real fast. And
but Chris, checklist kind of stuff that employees have to do, right?
Absolutely.
You got to checklist this stuff.
Absolutely. She started to accumulate money. And what do people do when they start to accumulate money?
Spend it.
They spend it. Damn right they spend it. She went and bought some toys. And I was totally on board with that because I wanted her to act exactly like an employee, an adult employee. She spent it on some toys. She did that a couple times. And I said, hey, I jumped in. I said, hey, maybe you want to save some of that money. So she reluctantly did. I'm not forcing anything on her, okay? I want her to make her own decisions. So I'm suggesting just occasionally to kind of point her in a direction the same way I would do that with an adult. Why don't you save your money and maybe we'll do something later with it? She eventually saves $25.
And her savings account was like a plastic bag, right?
Yeah, just a bag. I made a deposit into the bag. So so at 6 years old, she understood a deposit into her bank account, even though her bank account was in our house in a plastic bag.
Got it.
So she's learning how to be an employee with responsibilities. And there were some weeks where she refused to work and she did not get paid. When she eventually accumulated $25, I gave her the option to buy an asset around the house, something that I would consider an asset for her. I gave her the option to buy the family toaster for $25 in exchange for $1 a week rent that she would collect because the family was now using her toaster. All right. I could explain investing to her for the rest of my life. She would not understand it. But when it's put on a table like this, I could see the wheels start to think. But she rejected it, which is totally what I expected her to do because it was something foreign to her. She just wanted to keep making money in her job.
You were kind of taking her money, right? It was like, why are you taking that money, right?
She thought I was taking her money. Just like an adult would think somebody else is taking their money when they do an investment. Eventually, once a week, I just remind her, hey, you have this option to go do this if you want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. I'm fine. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Does that sound like she's safe and comfortable in her corporate job?
Inertia,
exactly. Finally, one day, she says, okay, I'll buy it. I said, great. I went and wrote up a 1-page agreement, and it only had about 5 sentences. It said, mommy and daddy, my 6-year-old will buy the toaster for $25, and mommy and daddy will pay $1 a week to my 6-year-old as rent. Me, my wife, and my daughter sit down at the kitchen table, and I read it to her, and she just got all red, and she started to cry.
Oh.
She gets up, she says, she yells, I don't want you to take my money. And she runs up to her room and slams the door. Okay. She's going through fear.
16, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm forcing the issue and putting her in a position of making a decision and facing the fear that most people don't get until their 30s or 40s.
You're right on there.
So
what happens next?
So I go talk to her a little bit later. She comes down. We decide not to do it then. About a week later, she's just playing in the living room, and I'm in the kitchen doing something, and she looks up at me and she says, fine, I'll sign the damn agreement. And I'm like, I did not say anything to her. I didn't know where she got that language from, but she was so emphatic about it. It's as if she was having a conversation in her mind, an argument in her mind with herself about whether or not to move forward. And right then, that was the magic, because she decided right then and there to become an investor. She decided to face the fear and move forward and do something other than being an employee. I got back out the agreement. We looked it over again, and she signed it. It was a Saturday when that happened. I drained her bank account, okay? She had 25. I drained it, but she had a little bit more than 25. I drained 25 out, but guess what happened? She got $3. She got paid $3 plus $1 for the following week's rent. So right away, she increased her income by 33%. So she went from $3 a week to $4 a week by making a decision.
How long did it take her to kind of notice that extra buck? Like immediately? Did it take a few weeks to pile up before she said, hey, this is kind of cool?
Every weekend, where's my money? Where's my rent, Dad? Where's my money, Dad? Every weekend. And we also had an agreement that if I'm late, if I don't pay by Sunday, she gets a late fee. She gets a $1 late fee. She doesn't care. She wants me to forget on the weekends, and she reminds me on Mondays. Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
So she caught on pretty quickly that having an asset, putting money down, generated payments. So that's fantastic.
She liked the idea. It didn't fully sink in yet, though. What happened was when she had enough money to do I offered her another asset for $25. When she had enough money, said, hey, you want to buy another asset? And folks, I just want to take a step back. When I say asset, it's something you buy that pays you. So you're putting your money into something that pays you. It's putting your money to work for you while you're doing something else.
Yeah, it's not a car that depreciates.
Yeah.
We're talking about, I guess for adults, it's rental properties. It's pieces of equipment you could lease out, things like that. And
yeah,
so she ramps up. How much of the kitchen does she eventually own, Chris?
She ended up buying 5 assets, and she ended up making $20 a week as this kind of went into her being 7. So as a 7-year-old, she was making $20. But about halfway through that process, I pulled her aside and I said, sweetie, those jobs, yeah, we're paying you too much and the family can't afford it anymore. So you have to stop doing your jobs and we're not going to pay you for them. And she says, I'm not going to get any more money from the jobs. I said, no.
A few years back, I started Outside Insights really as a platform to do good. The pandemic was raging. It was a time of confusion, angst, and it kind of triggered some creativity where, for me, I was constantly spending time with either entrepreneurial business clients or the workforce. And there were problems with people not necessarily being where they want to be in life. So the irony is Outside Insights and my book, Opposite the Crowd, which I co-authored with my dad, Alan Burkhard, were kind of born together, as Alan was some of those early guests. And those guest shows turned into chapters of our book. It was an audiobook first. It can be found anywhere you listen to audiobooks or listen to podcasts. It's out in both. But I did want to share for those of you that are interested in reading our story. And there really is some great stuff about helping you have the life you want, helping you work on leadership or master change. There's some great stuff in there. And that book is now available. It's available in a hardback from Amazon, and the Kindle as well as Audible versions are up. And I ask that you just, you're on Amazon anyway, ordering stuff for the house. Check out Opposite the Crowd and let me know what you think. Thank you. So, Chris, how did your daughter take the layoff after you took the jobs away?
Well, that was actually pretty funny because, think about it in terms of she was an employee and she was making her money getting the wage, but she also had this passive income that she was making. So I sat her down one day and I said, honey, I'm sorry, the family cannot afford to pay you anymore. You're getting paid too much. We have to stop you from doing your job. So you're no longer going to be able to do your jobs and we're not able to pay you for those. And she had this sad look on her face and looks like she was about ready to cry. But then she asked, will I still get the money from everything I bought? Meaning, will she still get paid rent? And I said, yes, sweetie, those are the assets that you bought. You will keep getting paid for those. And then she lit up like it was Christmas morning or something like that. And she said, okay, great, bye. And she took off and just went back to playing. It was absolutely amazing that she lost a source of income in the form of her wages, and she could not care less because she realized she still had this secondary source of income to fall back on. So great for her that she realized that.
And Chris, if you'll allow me to extrapolate a bit, I think that's the overarching point of the book. It's not uncommon for us as employees when we work for a paycheck to come in one morning and through no fault of our own, typically there's some sort of new plan, reduction in force, our division's sold off, we're taking out a layer of management. And the point is you can be in control of your own career and maybe end up where your daughter is, which is if you can work, but having some other streams of revenue kind of takes away that fear factor, if you will.
Absolutely. And I've been laid off twice in my life. And the first time I had nothing to fall back on. So I had to go get another job as quickly as possible. But the second time, no big deal. It was great. I was able to walk away and had all this passive income sources. So it was great to put her through that in direct parallel to what I had gone through, once on a negative side and then once on a positive side. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. If there's any way for the listeners to supplement their income so they have something to fall back on, absolutely. Take that opportunity to really fortify yourself against conditions that you may not have any control over.
Do you feel like you were a better employee when you didn't have the passive income, or you were a more productive employee when you had the passive income? I was thinking of your mindset and your approach to the job and stress and like, oh, I got to get this right. Would you notice a difference?
My stress was completely down once I had that passive income and I was growing all that stuff to the side in the side hustle, the real estate. Absolutely. And I think before that, I was a little bit naive. I was much younger and it took me some time to really build up and understand the consequences. Plus, as we get older, we have less time to recover from something so devastating as a job loss without passive income to fall back on. So I think it's more critical. The older we get, the more important it is to have something to fall back on.
Really interesting. I love in your book, you outline some of your philosophies on change that really align with what I was taught. Share a bit about your philosophies.
So we are going to go through change whether we like it or not. Some of them are surprises, some of them we expect, some of them are good, some of them are bad. And I think when we're faced with change, we just have to understand and acknowledge that it takes a lot of energy to go through that change. You think about a rocket sitting on Earth, waiting to go up in space and deliver a satellite or what have you. The rocket has so much fuel, extra fuel tanks, and as it takes off, it burns all of that fuel before it gets into space. So it needs all that fuel to break the gravity or the inertia that it currently has on Earth. We go through the same things. We get in a comfortable place and we're just cruising along. It takes a lot of energy and focus to get out of something that we've been doing for a long time. We're just going to have to realize what's going on and get through that, break through the inertia that holds us back, that holds us down or keeps us from moving forward.
It is really tough, Chris, because I mean, change is hard. It hurts, right? You got to do something different right now. The pleasure part of change is down the line. It's delayed gratification. I think you have a book in on that, to be quite honest. I believe being a change maker, Chris, where you are, is half of your advantage. And obviously it's what prompted you to make changes in your life. So I think it's an important part of your lessons.
Right. The change takes a long time too. So, it's important to start as early as possible. And in this case, in this structure, it's, creating other sources of income in addition to that, to the wage. The wages are critical. That's what we've been trained for. That's what we went to school for. But it's important to have something else to fall back on as part of that change, because it's coming. It's coming whether you want to or not. And whether that's a retirement, a layoff, a sickness, or something else going on in our lives, in your listeners' lives, it's important to realize that change is coming and to prepare as early for it as possible, because it accumulates. It's a snowball effect. As you start to gain other sources of income, you can ramp those up and grow those sources of income as long as time is on your side. If time's on your side and you've accepted to change, I like anyone's chances of coming through it financially and emotionally.
Chris, I used to think about savings in not a terribly wrong way, but I used to think I'm saving for a car, I'm saving for the 529 for a college education, I'm saving for whatever, a house. And what I've learned as I've in the middle innings of life, if you will, is that your savings should be savings because you really don't know what you're going to need it for. That's your point. It's not fun to hear, but health or something, there's always a surprise, and it's good to be in the position for that rainy day. It's what it's there for. So we'll wrap up your first book. There's a great picture and story where I think your daughter found some philanthropic ideas. Tell that story.
There was a local children's hospital that had an annual fun run, whatever $50 entry fee, you come, and you do a fun run in the morning, 5K. And then there was, it was a 1K, and they had a carnival after. And part of the carnival was all the kids who were in attendance would get a teddy bear, and the teddy bear was going to receive a physical from some of the doctors who were out there to really promote the whole experience. So my daughter really enjoyed that. And years later, after she had started making the rental income, she had some excess. And she came to me one day and said, "Daddy, where did this teddy bear come from?" And I reminded her that she got it from the hospital years ago. And she said, "I want to give some teddy bears back to the hospital so that they have some to give to other kids." And I thought that was a wonderful idea. So she said she wanted to use some of her money to go buy some. And I told her that I would match the amount of money that she spent on the teddy bears so that we could double her donation. So we went to a big box hobby store, and they gave us a great discount, and we bought a ton of stuffed animals, 2 big bagfuls of them. And we arranged to take them to the hospital. It was a specific drop-off time. And it was so rewarding to me to watch my daughter understand that she had excess capital, excess money, and she was able to give something back. That was something that I did not expect. I wanted her to grow her income, but she also grew the impact that she was making on the world by giving back to society.
For a 6-year-old to learn the concept of abundance, in other words, Daddy, I have plenty and I know more is coming because I've made good decisions, therefore I want to help, it's just extraordinary. You should be very proud. It's interesting how she is able to take really adult concepts and apply them through this lesson. I do hope people enjoy that book. And so you're an endurance athlete. You have a new book out called New Steel. How's that book tie into the journey that we're kind of laying out for the audience here bit by bit?
Yeah, you mentioned the endurance athlete. It's true. I'm guilty of that. I did a couple Ironman triathlons and a couple other endurance events. For example, something called the 29029. It's a mountain hike up to 29,029 feet repetitively on the same ski mountain.
Is that
anyway?
One day, Chris?
It's a 36-hour event. It starts at 6 a.m. on a Friday and it goes to 6 p.m. on Saturday. And the concept is to hike up a ski mountain, take the gondola down, and repeat that process until 36 hours have lapsed, or you've reached the cumulative height of Mount Everest, which is 29,029 feet. And that, frankly, was a life-changing experience because it's a slow motion pain. And you have the opportunity to quit anytime you want, but it's just what obstacles can we push ourselves through, and how can we overcome our mental state of wanting to stop? So
I assume you've read a little David Goggins if you're going to do that particular.
Yes, I do enjoy a little David Goggins' philosophy of no excuses. I do enjoy that. But anyway, it ties back into the passive income generation, because not having that 9-to-5 job, or really that 8-to-6 job, gave me time where I can go and train and build up my endurance while also having time for my family.
Abundant. So, in this case, time. How about that?
Yep. Time's our greatest asset. We don't know how much we have. Unlike money, we cannot go get more from anybody else. We can't borrow it. We can't do anything. So time is our greatest asset, and we have to use it the right way. But and
then of course, being able to take care of yourself, using that time for that, I'm sure you feel better, have better energy, better confidence. You use your brain obviously all day long, so it's great to test the body. I know. What was your objective with the book? I know you were sort of bringing a point to life.
So background on the book, New Steel, is that I had to have both of my hips replaced.
Wow.
The first one being about 10 years ago when I was in my 30s. And I did a lot of physical therapy between the surgeries, which were about 18 months apart. And then I did a lot of physical therapy after that. And it really brought to light how critical time is. So I wanted to really enjoy my life more and do more exciting things. And I turned my attention to doing something that I didn't think I could do before my surgeries, namely the Ironmans. So I spent a lot of time training for those. And the concept of the book is that regardless of the challenges that we face, whether they're physical or financial or emotional, whatever we have, and we all have something, we all have some challenge, we can overcome that and do something far greater than we think we're capable of. So absolutely love the book and what it can do to impact the world.
My dad says that everybody's got shit, and I love where you are with that. So we've hinted at some books with Goggins. You've written too. Do you have any favorite books you would recommend to the audience that are in line with our topics that we've covered today?
Yeah. So one of my favorite books, and one that had a very early impact on me, right, starting in college, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And it really gave me a different perspective on people in the world, in that people, I did not realize before reading that book and implementing some of the concepts in it, that people are so willing to help. All it takes is giving them a little attention and sincere appreciation. And as soon as I started doing that, the world opened up for me. My communication, I was able to communicate with people a lot better and differently. So it immediately had an impact. Every day I read that book, and it only took me 4 or 5 days. Every day I read that, I was able to implement something, and I continue to do that to this day. So that How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's a really old book. And then,
hey, Chris, just my audience can see this, but I took a Dale Carnegie course from over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was thought for the day: be thankful for the problems of your job. They provide about half your income. Because if it were not for the things that go wrong, the difficult people you have to deal with, and the problems of unpleasantness of your workday, someone could be found to handle your job for half of what you're being paid. Now that flies in the face of our discussion today, but that is one of my all-time favorite books. And if you're trying to figure out how to communicate with people and understand people, it's a great recommendation.
Yeah, and I loved it because it's not just communication; it's an internal change of the reader's perspective to the world. So it's not just a verbal change; it's an internalized, different understanding of how people and the world work.
I think I cut you off talking more Dale Carnegie. Did you have one more suggestion?
Yeah, the David Goggins book, Can't Hurt Me. It was very poignant because at the time I was getting ready for the Ironmans and, struggling a little bit. And that really just helped me understand that I could go farther and be more intense than I originally anticipated. So that was really great. And I think that applies, not just to endurance events, but just to life, because we all face challenges, and no matter what, we're responsible for the outcome. It's not relatives. It's not the government. It's not the climate. It's us. We are responsible for our success and that of our family. So really enjoyed the message of that.
Chris, did you happen to catch the book that I trained with a Navy SEAL? It's where he is the trainer, but he never uses his name, but he goes into New York for a month and trains with a famous guy. It's really...
That's Jesse Itzler's book, Living with a SEAL.
Living with a SEAL.
Yeah, very, very entertaining. Some great lessons in that too. Jesse certainly has an exciting writing style for sure.
Yes, he does. So we're getting to the point where we can wrap some things up. You've shared a lot. I always like to give my guests a chance to share a lesson or a message. What would you like to do with your time? There's 62,000 people that don't hang up on me. So what would you like to leave them with?
I say, make sure to take the next step forward. The next step forward means progress. You don't have to reach the top of the mountain on your next step, but you have to take that next step. The next step forward lets us see a different horizon. It opens doors. It gives us more opportunity. And then once we're in that new position, we focus on that next step, because as we keep taking steps forward, again, we have more opportunities. We're more skilled. We see things differently. We meet more people. We see the world differently the more we go forward. So if you're looking to make $1 million a year, take a step that's going to give you a skill where you can take another step. It's all a series of stepping stones. $1 million is not going to come right away, but maybe 10 steps down the line, you're going to get there. But it all starts with that first step. We have to keep going forward. And there's going to be setbacks. Absolutely going to be setbacks.
I like your point, though. If you take one step, you're standing at a different vantage point and you have new information. And most of us try to eat the elephant all at once, right? So you're basically saying, take a step, move forward, just get started. Chris, if somebody, passive income means a lot of things to a lot of people. You've shared your story of how you went and got information. But if someone says, well, geez, I want to take Chris B's advice, and I'm going to take a first step, but so do they just Google who to go talk to? Do they read a book? how do they, I know they got to learn it themselves, but give them a little quick primer on what they should do.
First of all, there's a lot of free material out there. There's great podcasts just like this on any topic you want to learn about. Get on the podcast, listen to them. There's also free events. You know, you could just Google meetup or live meetings in your area on whatever topic, and you'll get a whole slew of different options. Go. Feel embarrassed. Feel scared. Feel intimidated.
Do I go interview realtors, or is that a waste of time?
I don't know about interviewing realtors. If you want to become a realtor, I would imagine it's important to talk to some realtors. If you want to invest, realtors always have something to sell you, though. You know, it's you got to be careful who you're talking to. So I would do some due diligence and, you know, go to live meetings. People at the events that I've gone to, whether they're 12 people or 500 people, seem to be very helpful to share information. It seems to be a very helpful industry.
Okay. So I always like to kind of wrap with this question. Reflect on where you were at age 21, obviously studious and athletic. If you could travel back in time, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Keep the options open and really identify what the ultimate goal is, and realize that there's many different paths to get to that goal. You know, I wanted to make a lot of money and have impact on the world. And I thought that was through further education, and that worked to a certain extent. But now I've realized that there's other options. I just wish I would have realized those other options were available a lot earlier in life. You know, everyone starts investing in real estate and then they all say the same thing. They say, I wish I would have started this 20 years ago. And my message to my 21-year-old self would be, stay open to the possibilities that there are other ways to get to where we want to get to, the ultimate destination that we want.
I think that's terrific. Chris, are you training for anything up and coming? Just on a personal note?
I have a couple things on my radar, a couple goals. I want to do a 50-mile race, a 100-mile race, and an Ultraman event, and that's like an Ironman on steroids. So I'm working my way up to those types of events. I just got to get them on a calendar. But I just got done with a bike ride before we recorded this, and I try to do something every day: swim, bike, or run, lift weights. I think it's important to really have a schedule and maintain the health.
Well, we have show notes. We'll include something on the 29019. I think I got that right. If not, you'll correct me.
29029.
29. Oh, okay. Got it. And we'll make sure your books are listed. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. I do hope you enjoyed the time and appreciate everything we've got going.
Well, thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate being here, and I hope your listeners gained a lot of insights, and I was happy to share. Absolutely pleasured and honored to be part of this. Thank you so much. Sir.